Organizing the presentation, press the Start Broadcast on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow attendees to hear you. This system will notify you when you begin your broadcast. Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, now. Okay, and welcome everybody to the third in our Ajento Webinar Series called The Efficient Journey to Implement GDPR. I'm just going to put a little question out there to see if anybody has any issues. If you can do me a favour and just let me know, and hopefully we can crack on with the webinar. So here we are today, our third webinar on GDPR, and in this one we're talking about the efficient journey to implement GDPR. So can you hear me okay, Santiago?
Yes, I can hear you, Derek.
Excellent, right. So just as before, we're just going to carry on to a couple of slides just to start with. This is, as I said, is a third one. We are obviously in the efficient journey. Apologies for everybody that actually registered and we then had to move the actual webinar, and but thank you very much for attending. The fourth one then, obviously, as you can see, which is in October, which is around how to build the business case. So today is more about how to use the efficient use of technology, etc. So with that, I'm just going to quickly hand over to Santiago, who heads up all of the GDPR strategy for Kiris. And just to say, there's a few polls in here as well. So if you could be attentive and help us out, that'd be really appreciated. Over to you, Santiago.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. I'm going to speak mostly today about the technologies that allows you to implement a GDPR transformation in your organization. But very quickly, just to brief you about, for those that don't know what is the GDPR, just a few very quick slides first. So what is the GDPR? As you probably all know, is the protection of people with regards to the processing of personal data, and processing is very important. I'm going to come back to that word in a second. In particular, this legislation has strengthened the citizens' right, and I will come back to that in detail as well. But that's one of the challenges. Now, any person can ask an audit to an organization that holds personal data if they wish, or they can even ask to be erased, or they can ask to maybe oppose to the way that an organization is dealing with their data. So it is challenging because you need to control your data, prove you're in control, and be able to find any of the personal data that any person can ask for. And in that sense, this law also has tried to adapt to the new technological developments. And this is important because, as you know, information technology is changing very rapidly, and that poses new possibilities for users of data, people that create data or transform data, analyze data. But that also put organizations at risk because they may be doing things that the users don't know exactly what are the implications in relations to the law. So we are going to visit some of those points in this presentation. Next slide. As you may know, the importance of being compliant is that if you, as an organization, are not compliant, you can have a fine up to 20 million euros or 4% of the worldwide annual turnover. And this is a big fine. It can also, the other part is, of course, the reputational damage. Many organizations that we already know that have had scandals about hackers getting into their security and bypassing the security and actually getting personal data, have lost the trust of their customers, and therefore the reputational damage can also impact your revenue, sometimes even more than the fine itself. Next. So who is impacted? I'm going to just give a quick example of some of our clients. This is real examples from a client, so you will understand how the technology can help. The complexity is, in this example, I was working with a client, Celine, who wanted to do some statistical analysis, so very simple, typical analysis. She needed to link some dates of birth with some postcode and some product information in order to understand the percentage of people of certain age group and certain geography that are consuming specific products. So something that many of your analysts can be doing. So the question here is she, by taking an extract of that information, handling personal data? You have multiple choices here, yes, no, she's not. So if you click next, the answer here is actually that, click on the next button, Derek, please. The answer is that, okay, sorry, one back. She is actually dealing with the personal data because she has full access to the database, so she could eventually link that information to the personal data. So this is just to show you that the combinations that you can do with certain type of data, even if she's not dealing with names or she's ignoring a particular, let's say, ID number or something, if she can link it to her database, she will be dealing with personal data. Let's go to the next slide. I was saying that the law is about data processing of the personal data. So data processing can be creation of data, collection of data, storage of data, viewing data, transporting data, modifying, transferring, deleting data. There are many activities that any analyst, any person within an organization is doing with regards to personal data is considered as processing. And that means that you need to understand the implications of all these type of activities. If you can click in next, I often illustrate this with this illustration. I mean, people, citizens are often lost in front of IT. Here the question is, are you sure this is how we get data into the cloud? And why I put this is because another example of one of our clients was an analyst, a marketing analyst that actually was tired. He wanted to go home, but he needed to, do this marketing campaign. He had a deadline. So what he did is he took the extract of the information and sent it to himself by email to his Gmail account. And actually, he didn't know that by doing that, he was putting his organization at risk, because Gmail is a cloud server that is in a way considered as an international transfer, because actually that server wasn't in his own country. So again, you don't know what it means when you are sending data to the cloud. Many of our users and client staff don't know, but that can put the organization at risk. And that is why understanding the technology is very important. Next slide.
Right, so we're going to do a quick poll. Within the poll, this question is specifically, where are you in the GDPR process, so we can just understand. So I'm going to launch this now. If you wouldn't mind doing me a favour and just answering a few of these queries. Number one, I know nothing, I'm just starting out. Number two, I've read a bit on GDPR. Number three, I've started looking at it, but we're still quite confused. Number four, we know what we need to do, but we're now in planning. And five, fully know what to do, and we're now implementing. So we're just going to leave that for a few more seconds, collect responses, and then now we're going to close it. Okay. So Santiago, obviously the response that we can see there, we're going to share on the screen. You can see there about 20% of people are attending. Nothing, they're just starting out. We've got 60% say we've started looking at it, but we're actually still quite confused. And then 20% said we know what we need to do, but we're now in planning. So I hope that helps. Going to hide the poll and go back to the slides for you. On to the next slide.
Thank you, Derek. Next slide.
Okay. Okay.
Let's go to next one again.
That one.
Okay, so the examples I was giving you just before was to explain that different combinations of data, postcode, geographical area, name, different type of data can be classified into standard data or sensitive data. For example, the date of birth can be standard, but having the national register number can be a sensitive piece of information. So this is just to say that this gives some challenges for some organizations, because you need to have the right classification. This is basically being able to understand what pieces of information you have, what is sensitive, and what combinations of that sensitive with standard can be at risk. And therefore, if we go to the next slide, what this brings is the need for what we call MDM. MDM is Master Data Management, and I'm going to go back to that in a second, but there are some tools that would allow you to have the right data quality, the right master of your data management, in order to be able to classify it and to be in control. Let's go to the next slide. The other part that is important is data documentation, and you need to be able to document what processes, where is your data, how you are processing it, because the law is that any customer can ask for an audit, and therefore if there is an audit, you need to be able to show and demonstrate how you are processing your data. So right documentation and right awareness for your employees. You need to train your employees. Everybody needs to know how they are maintaining data, an overview of the type of data they are processing, the purposes why they're using that data, how long they are archiving, the retention periods, and if they do any transfers to third parties or different countries, they need to know that that could put organizations at risk. Let's go to the next slide. So what needs to happen in the for the GDPR? This is the 5 pillars of GDPR. Privacy by design is really ensuring the technical organizational protection, so that you have measures in place to prevent data loss and dissemination. For example, that you have appointed a data privacy officer and that you minimize data transfers. Next, you have the second pillar is security by default, and this is about applying principles such as minimizing the time that you retain, that you collect and retain personal data, limit the storage time as well. The third pillar is more about the data accountability. So this is more the data documentation I was just talking about, identifying and documenting the personal data processing to be able to justify why you are doing it, and only process for business purpose. The fourth pillar is related to the respect of individual rights, and I was saying before that rights have been strengthened in this law. Any citizen can have the right to be informed about how data is being processed, can ask to access their data, rectify the way it's processed, object, or ask to erase, be forgotten, or transfer all the data to themselves. And finally, the fifth pillar is the breach notification. Every organization needs to notify in case that there is any incident in their security. And this communication needs to happen before 72 hours. So all these pillars brings challenges, and the best way to deal with that is to understand, map out how you are doing your processing, and then use the right technologies. Let's go to the next slide. So I say map out. First, there is a generic understanding. We put this as the information life cycle. You need to understand how the data is flowing within your organization. Next, you need to, first of all, understand the people in the organization, who is accessing data, who is updating data, who is changing data. Then you need to understand the business purposes. Why are they doing it? Why some people have the right to archive or to process, and why other people shouldn't be accessing certain data. So understanding the purposes. And then finally, once you have mapped out all that, next, you need to put the right technology in place to allow you to then implement their policies and automate the process, or be efficient in the way that you deal with the changes within the organization in order to become compliant. Next. So the implementation, you could start in different areas of your organization. As I was explaining, metadata management, data quality could be some of those, looking at your old architecture, your security, the data lifecycle management, etc. So next, what we often advise to our clients is to try and prioritize where you think the biggest risks are. Next slide, please. So instead of trying to tackle everything at once, prioritize. Here's an example where you can start with the metadata management and the data quality, which are the examples I gave you before from the clients, and the master data, references, and data management. So I'm going to show you some technologies that allows you to address that first in order to then have a more holistic approach and address the rest. So where to start? Let's start there. So let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to start talking now how technology can help you. But in order to understand how technology can help you, you need to understand the challenge. Of course, you cannot protect what you don't know. So you need to have some insights to understand where your data is. You need to know what needs to be deleted, what needs to be secure, how to find the individual data, the citizens' data, how to amend individuals' data, and how to delete individuals' data. Next. All this is demanded by law. Yes, you could go ahead with the next slide. Here are the articles of the GDPR that demand organizations to do that. And this seems complex and difficult, and that's why there are some tools for that. Let's go to the next one. So what kind of data, and this is important, it could be files, it could be emails, it could be text. Personal data is even considered within pictures, as long as you can recognize the people there, or even multimedia, films, cameras that are filming people within the organization or around the organization, PDF, blogs, comments, connections. And how big that can be, well, it depends. Some organizations have really gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes. It doesn't matter. The law
Okay, we're back. Did you, apologies for that. Are you there, Santiago?
Yes, yes, I am asking if you can go to the next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, there you go.
There you are. Thank you. Apologies for that. So as I was saying, there is a big variety, and the challenge is that organizations retain too far redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. A recent study that Gartner Review did shows that 70% of the typical amount of unstructured data is of no value. And there is a lot of what we call dark data. Organizations are not aware of the sensitive content within data that they keep that has no value for them, but is sensitive still. 35 to 45% of the data created this year will hold no business value in the next year. So all this is also an opportunity for organizations when they're dealing with the GDPR. They can also start thinking what is the right data to keep and which one gives value. And our approach, what we advise organizations, is not to see this as a cost and as a pain, but more of an opportunity. This is an investment. By being compliant with the GDPR, organizations are also called to actually understand their data assets, be in control of them, and therefore keep the data that really gives value. And if you invest in that data, then try to get value out of it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as I was saying, you need to deal with all type of files. The regulation is about data, and data is everywhere, and therefore you need to have tools that allows you to scan different structured and unstructured formats that allows you to scan different size and volumes, and of course different type of complexity. Next. And we recommend tools that allows you to actually scan this personal information in their native location. The less you transfer and move data, the better. So hopefully you will use tools that allows you to go to the sources in a way. That's one of the main recommendations. Next. So this is an example of what we call data profiling. And there are some tools that allows you to choose your sources and then go and scan those sources. It could be emails, it could be images, it could be files, etc. So you can scan at the same time so many sources that you want with so many types of data formats, and then identify the data types, the ranges, look at the type of data, if it's talking about people, places, other type of personal data. So in a way, start classifying, and as you are doing that data profiling, you will start having, let's say, a heat map of risk, of which areas, which sources there may be more volume of personal data, and therefore more risk, and therefore that you should put more attention. Next. So in summary, this approach wants you to start by exploring what data is in which systems, and then refine that approach with some filters depending on your company policies and your common sense. Try to identify which data assets you want to act, what are the risks that you need to cope with, and which are the risks you can assume, and then decide what you delete, what you move, what you copy. And that is where the heat maps start giving you a better idea of the different activities, and you can actually keep that monitoring ongoing, because remember that it's not a one-off. You are going to do this process, and the organization is going to continue producing data. So you need to keep an eye on that for the future as well. And that's where also these tools will help. Let's go to the next.
Okay, so just in a quick more poll, just to see where we are in terms of how you are you more aware of what GDPR is and how it will impact your business. So we're going to run another quick poll now. I'm going to launch that through. And you can see up there, so the first one is yes, I think I'm aware. Yes, it's very clear. No, I'm still not sure how we're going to be impacted, and no, I'm still quite confused. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a few responses there, and we'll close that in a few seconds. Okay, right, we're going to close it now, and then we'll share it. So quite a stark thing. So yeah, we've got a number of people on the webinar that saying yes, think so, know where we are, more aware, and yes, it's also very clear. So going to hide the poll and move back to the webinar. So over to yourself, Santiago.
Thank you, Derek. So steps I was showing you as a methodology. So first you need to analyze and the different information flow life cycle, as I was saying, where the data is produced and where it lives, and then scan the data, the assets, to try to identify personal identifiable information, and then monitor that, and have a GDPR master domain that allows you to control that and then keep reports. So I'm going to go in detail these steps with some tooling that can help you automate that process, and I will explain how that works. Let's go to the next. So the first is the analysis. And the analysis is about, you know, scanning those systems and understanding if it is GDPR related or not, if it should be there or not, if you need to move it, you need to secure it, if you need to delete it, and why is it there. And the purpose is very important because the law doesn't ask to delete any personal information necessarily. You need to just be able to justify why you have it. So if you can justify why you have that type of data, you can keep it. So knowing why is it here is also very important, and that's why it's important to map out where it is and then decide if you need to keep it there or not. And then, of course, how does it look like? Because you need to be in control. As I said before, the citizens can request to change, to erase, to delete, to maybe they can request to not process it in a way or in another. So you need to know how it looks like in order to be able to cope with those rights. Let's go to the next. So after performing that analysis, then the next step is in a way being able to recognize the different patterns. I was saying, how does it look like? So here is tools that allows you to recognize digits and letters, for example, to be able to scan, is it an email, is it a name, is it a location? Let's go to the next slide. So once you're doing that analysis, you are going to be able to identify exactly if it is a GDPR component or not. And you can do that in all your systems, CRM, marketing, any other system. You are going to start by pattern recognition, associating to GDPR or not. And this can be an automated task where you train the system to recognize certain patterns, and then the system go ahead and find them all for you. Next. So once you have done that, you can then start monitoring. You can start then looking where it exists, which systems have more compliance risks than others, which system have more legitimate, no, let's go back a second, more legitimate or sensitive or insensitive data. I was giving you the examples at the beginning of the seminar that some data is standard, some data is more sensitive. And these systems can allow you to classify that, in which systems I have more sensitive than other ones, and which ones I need to control more than other ones. And that's kind of the monitoring. Let's go to the next. So once you have that, you need to model, create a model of your GDPR to be able to know that you don't have duplications, for example, or that you don't have archives that are basically there. What is the master source that you need to control, and which ones are the duplicates or the repetitions of them, which ones you need to secure because it's kind of the golden record where everything refers to. Of course, if you, as we said before, if a citizen can ask for deleting all the records, you need to be able to link to that ID or that person or that name all the other records that are related to it. So having the golden record of that person, that individual, that allows you to relate to the rest is very important in order to be able to link and retrieve the information or erase it, etc. And this needs to be automated in order to cope with the individual's rights. So once you have that automation, you're going to be able to respond to the different claims. And of course, imagine if you are a big organization and you have many customers, this needs to be dealt in volume and very quickly. So automation is very important. Next. This is an example of just the one before is an example of how you can view a golden record, here represented in yellow, that is related to other records. And here again, because you need to be able to map out everything in the system that is related to that individual. And here is just a question of tables that relate to that first order table And as I said, there are tools that allows you to map out those relationships. Let's go to the next one. So finally, then you need to report. And the report, it could be to an auditor, it could be to the individuals that are asking for that. You need to have reports in different formats. And as I say, it depends on request. So if they request for information, then you need to be able to print that and send those reports. If they request for deletion, you need to be able to have everything well documented in order to prove that you deleted from everywhere the information that was sitting in your systems. Let's go to the next. This is just a representation of that.
So just near enough the last poll, but just so that we're seeing where everybody is at the moment. So how do you now know how GDPR will impact your business? So if you wouldn't mind just having a quick look there and helping us to understand, yes, but I need to understand what do I do internally. No, still not sure how to do it and how it directly will impact me. And also, no, I'm still confused. So if you wouldn't mind just responding for us, that'd be very helpful. Okay, we're going to close the poll now and just going to share. And you can see here, so 25% of the people on the webinar are saying yes, we know how it's going to impact us. 50% saying yes, but still need to understand what to do internally, and 25% saying still not sure how it would directly impact us, which is quite a interesting set of results, especially based on the last two webinars we've had. But we'll come to that near the end when we do the Q&A as well. So back over to yourself, Santiago, on to the next part.
Yes, so I was saying technology in different areas, and I was saying that we need to first focus on select where the priorities are. I was just illustrating first the metadata management, data quality, master data references as a start, but of course you can have a more holistic approach where once you have dealt with those priority areas, deal with the rest, with the security, with the life cycle in itself. So here I'm going to enlarge the example and go more to the data lifecycle management, to the master of the security management, etc. So let's go to the next slide. And this is an approach where, as I show you here, I'm representing on top the pillars that I already mentioned, the rights of the citizens, the security, the consent, the accountability, the design by default. And for that, you need to create some rules, some policies. What processes? You need to analyze which people in the organization are dealing with data, what are the processes that you need to put in place in order to cope with the regulation, and those policies, then what are the audits that you can do. So what are you doing, why are you doing, for how long are you doing it? Look at that aspect, and there are tools that will allow you to automate that. That is what we call governance tools. And there are different flavors of how to then govern and automate and maintain that audit of the processes and policies. With that in mind, then you go to the data management, which is looking at how then those policies are applied in the data sources and how those policies can be managed in the data itself. And that is another set of tools. And then finally, let's go to the next, is really what I was showing you just before, is about them going into the systems themselves and controlling what is in there. And then finally, if you go to the next one, is about the security. So wrapping up everything with a security system that allows you to monitor compliance and that you can have that security in place. So I'm going to go in detail in some of those aspects now. Let's go to the next one. Yes, next again. Okay, so here is the different pillars. So we started with the data management layer, which is the information lifecycle. And that's what I just mentioned before, how to find the sensitive data. Then from there you have, after you do your discovery and you map out everything, you need to put some governance in place. I was saying the governance tools allows you to then look what you retain and what you dispose. And then from there, you can then start deciding on encryption and security of the type of data that you are retaining. And then you need to put some access management. which users can access which type of data. That's really important. Even if you retain data, it doesn't mean everybody should be seeing everything. So you need to know who has access to what, and that needs to be controlled and monitored by, for example, your DBA. Somebody needs to be responsible of giving access and controlling the access to it. And then after that, if there is an incident, you need to identify that incident. There are also tools that allows you to notify automatically when there is secure incidents, whenever any database or any app or any infrastructure is kind of at risk, and then monitor that and report that ongoing. There is your DPO, I was saying at the beginning, that is on top of all the governance structures. So the data protection officer, and then there could be also other areas of your business that has other people responsible. The group compliance, for example, is often very much related to ensuring the security and the compliance of the data, by its own nature of the role anyways. So this gives you kind of a generic approach. Here are some also more of the architecture, because behind the tools you have an architecture. So you need, as I say, a governance layer that is managed probably by the data stewards and the DPO, and all that is monitoring structured and unstructured data. And again, you have tools for each of them, and all that you will have some analysts that are discovering and mapping out and using that data and transforming it, but only through the access control that I was describing before. Let's go to the next one. So with that, now we are coming more to a holistic approach, where the GDPR has a governance mechanism, policies, and tools in place that allows you to cover the different aspects of the data privacy, and the third party also is very important, knowing who you transfer to, who can access from outside the organization. So this approach also look at the people and the communications then between employees. They need to be aware, but also external and internal communication. And then the processes, HR processes, the CRM, other business processes that are relating to the data, the personal data. And then finally looking at the data lifecycle and the security, wrapping everything around with the right tools. Let's go to the next. So just a summary to wrap up the main points we made here. You need to first focus on your data. I was saying discover and map your data, catalog your data, then create the right policies and the control, document all of that, and have the right link between the different systems and the different data assets. Try to do it at source, and with that, document and have your mappings in your architecture. So this is the first focus, the focus on the data. Once you have coped with the data, then let's go to the next one. We advise to focus on the process, and that's what I just showed after, the more the governance part, the type of people that access, that can delete, that can correct the data, and then the consent management is very important. Remember that you can avoid automating and putting a lot of process Yes, here we are.
That one?
So, excellent. So then, as I say, focus on data, focus on processes, and then focus on security. And again, here are some illustrations of some of the tools that allows you to control based on your metadata that you created at the beginning with the first tools, the security that allows you to give access control, giving the metadata and the right people and the right processes, who has visibility of what restrictions you need to give to what users. And that's why the steps I gave are logical, because once you have metadata, so you are in control of your data and the references and the classification and the documentation of the data, and you have visibility of the processes and policies that you have created and designated, the security is just a way of making sure that that is enforced and that that is respected by the different users. And then you can monitor that with the security tools. Of course, there is also security around your infrastructure that you need to have, so that's kind of more the physical security. And then the IT security in general, that goes from everything from encryption of the data assets, of the systems, but everything to also avoid cyber intrusion and detect if there is intrusion, and of course if there is intrusion, notification automatically notify, so you can respect the fifth pillar of the law, which is, as I said before, the need for notification before 72 hours. So again, there are different tools for this. Let's go to the next one. So just to finish, what we have said is, once you have this in place, you will need to keep monitoring, keep reporting, and keep acting, because as you know, is not just an endpoint becoming compliant. It's not a journey that finishes the day you put in place all these systems. You need ongoing work. Data is produced continuously, is going to keep growing and becoming more complex. So you need to keep monitoring the activities of the users, the people that touches. You need to keep knowing where the information is stored. Is it stored in the right places as you already designed it from the beginning? Are the security measures in place appropriate to cope with the new data that keeps coming in? Is the access still relevant, or you need new type of access data systems? And as you keep reporting and have an eye on that, keep acting if things change or if you need to do something about it. Next.
So we're just going to do the final poll of the webinar. So how helpful was the webinar? If you wouldn't mind just giving us a response for that, that'd be very helpful. So thank you very much. Excellent. Yes, but I definitely need some more help. Great work, but I think I knew most of it. You know, not that much, because I'm already in the process. Not that much, but I do need some help. So yeah, we've got a good response so far. That's perfect. Let me just close this now and then share it. And as you can see, we've got 40% said yes, excellent, thank you very much. 20% said yes, but I do need some help. 20% said great work, but I think I knew most of it. And then finally, you know, was it helpful? Not that much, but because I really do need some help. So that's probably where we probably need to get in touch with Santiago, especially on that one with regards to understanding. I think about 4 or 5 people have responded to in that area. I'm already in the process, and I also really need to help. So just going to hide this now, and then go back to the webinar. So Santiago, we've got a couple of slides afterwards, which is just how Kivas can help everybody. But just to say, thank you very much for your time so far, everybody. Any questions, please send those through to the questions poll. There is another webinar on Tuesday the 10th of October. And plus, if you're interested, Santiago, myself and another company, maybe 1 or 2 companies are going to be running a London GDPR workshop event, if you like, in November. If you are interested in attending that, limited numbers obviously, but if you're interested, please email us at derek.owen@ajento.com. Santiago, I'm just going to hand back to the final slide for you to take us through.
Yes, this is just to wrap up. This is how Heroes and Ajento differentiate themselves in the market to address the GDPR needs of their clients, the GDPR journey. We believe is a journey that goes hopefully in two dimensions. Here represented in the horizontal axis, the journey of compliance. As we will help you evolving of that journey, the different steps that we're going to take will hopefully also help you evolve in the vertical axis, which is about transforming your organization to be more in power of their own data assets. And if you are more empowered, you have more control, you know what data you have, you know who does what with the data, you will hopefully also have you will have the possibility to have more value out of that data, and therefore transform your organization to embrace the digital paradigm we live today, with organizations that are really using data actively to understand better their customers, to suggest better products and services, or new products and services, to actually retain the customers, to avoid the churn, to understand that how the market is evolving, etc., etc. So really using information in a way that will help you be more efficient or get more value in terms of profitability or market share. And this is really the journey. GDPR is a call to action that is allowing us to talk to organizations that also are going back to their programs of big data or projects of analytics and insights. So how are you using personal data needs to be framed within a broader question of how are you wanting to actually get value out of your data, and that is the type of help we can provide in answering the questions.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have come through, so here we go. Should we go through the questions? There we go.
Yes.
Okay, so what we've got here, Santiago, thank you very much indeed. We've got a couple of questions, some of them around, how do I contact my customer base, when do I contact it? We've got a couple here also, which is, number one, which software are you using to do the explore, refine, and heat maps?
Yeah, I mean, there are different flavors, there are different softwares. Here I show different visuals. One was from IBM, the other one was from information builders. It all depends. As I said, you have different formats and files. You have files that are structured, files that are unstructured, meaning unstructured is text, is pictures, is sound, is videos. For that, you will need a certain type of software. Other softwares, more vendors exist on the structured data. So for more, as I show you here, numbers and letters that are in digits, you can cope with certain type of vendors. So it really depends on what you want to scan and produce those heat maps.
Okay. We've got another one on the same sort of thing. Can you tell us what is the name of the program you use to identify if the information is GDPR related or not?
Say that again. What is the what?
What is the name of the program or the software that we can use to identify if information is GDPR related or not?
Right. The one I show here that had the GDPR component, which you are probably talking about, is the information builders one. And again, there are different flavors and there are different tools that can help you. But if you want to have the discussion, we can take it offline. I can look at the systems you have in place, because you may have systems that are very close to what you need, or if not, the skills you have in order to advise you what's the best tool to go for. Okay. And otherwise, out of the box, this one is information builders.
Okay, right. There's just a couple more here, which is if I've got a large database of people that sort of, you've got your current client base, but you've also generally got a sales sort of lead contacts database. What's the process I need to go to make sure that I'm GDPR compliant with those two different databases?
Yeah, what we often recommend is, before putting any tool in there to do the profiling and the scanning, what you need to do is do more kind of an analytical exercise. So knowing your business, knowing who enters data, who processes data, who deletes data, etc. What type of databases will contain what type of data, and which ones will be at risk. And this, I'm saying, is a mental process, but in a way it's like having a hypothesis, and it's a little bit like a statistical approach. If the databases are really big and complex, it's like when you do statistics, you have your hypothesis and then you take a sample of an area where you think there is a risk to confirm if what you are thinking is right or wrong. My point being, if it is too big and too many databases and those databases are complex, the tools will allow you doing those samples and confirming, but you need to have a mental map first. Otherwise, you can very quickly get lost in a very big ocean of data. So try to think proactively before using the tool.
So ultimately then, Santiago, if you've got, say you've got 5,000 clients and sort of 50,000 prospect database, obviously there's a process that businesses have to go through to make sure they're compliant and make sure that they've got authorization to mail them in future. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And ultimately that is a process to go through, because obviously companies, both clients and prospects, if you like, for sales divisions, you can't just mail out and expect everybody to come back and say, yes, you know, I'm happy for you to contact me and thank you, that's the information you've got. Is that the process that the companies have to go through? Every company that's got some form of communication, email, contact information, should really be contacting their contacts, saying, this is the information we have on you, are you happy for us to continue communicating with you? Is that correct?
Well, I will say there's no one-fit-all solution. It depends on the type of business and the purposes, as I said at the beginning. If that justifies you having data there, you may not need to contact and ask. But if it doesn't, you better, yes, ask for consent. So again, you need to do a little bit of analysis. That's why we are here to help often, is to help you doing your analysis depending on your business. If you are a B2B or a B2C company, the process is going to be different. If you have, for example, legal constraints and you need to say you're a financial services organization and you need to do for money laundering, you need to keep some data and report on that personal data, because otherwise you cannot be transparent of the transaction. You don't even need to ask for any consent. That is the law anyways. So it really depends on your nature of organization, the purposes and the constraints. We will need to analyze, and then I can say, yes, it's as simple as that, or maybe it's a little more complicated.
So in some respects, that could be potentially a nightmare for the people at the other end of this, you know, the contacts that are in databases. Obviously, if a company goes and buys a list, they're going to be buying that list off of a very, you know, hopefully a large, if you like, data house, and that data house would have probably sold that list out to hundreds of thousands of companies across the Europe, if you like. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that that data has actually got authorization to communicate with them? Is that the list builder's responsibility, or is that the actual person who's mailing out to these people, regardless of their clients or their prospects? Whose responsibility is it?
Yeah, I guess the ones that are contacting, the ones that are doing the list and sending all those communications, because at the end of the day, what the law wants to prevent is abusive use of personal data. And if you are contacting people that didn't give you that permission, or that is not related to the way you should use that data, then you are abusing that trust that people with a list.
Okay, that was the last question. We've got 2 minutes to go. So Santiago, thank you very much indeed for all your help. As I said before, we do have the final GDPR webinar that's on Tuesday, the 10th of October at 2 p.m. UK time. And obviously, if you are interested in attending the London GDPR event, as I said, the spaces will be limited. But we'll be running a workshop. There'll be a couple of companies there that are actually walking through exact issues that businesses have, real life issues that businesses have, and how they're addressing them. So if you're interested, please email me at dirk.owen@agento.com. We'll be sending out a communication in the next couple of weeks or so with regards to that date. So hopefully a few of you will be attending. So anything else, please just don't forget just to email me. Thanks very much indeed, Santiago.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, everyone.